Detroit has 2 first-round picks in the 2023 NFL Draft. Could one of them be a quarterback? Perhaps at 6? Let's discuss. Okay, hello, and welcome to Draft Brothers, a Champions Round podcast. I am your host, Jeff Hasley, and I'm joined by my draft brother, Dan Turner. And today we have on the show a friend of the channel, Jeff Risdon. He's the managing editor of the Lions Wire, and he's co-host of the Detroit Lions podcast. And we're going to spend the next 10 or 15 minutes or so discussing what the Lions may do in the 2023 NFL Draft. Jeff, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jeff. It's easy to remember your name, so this will be great, man. I'm just still excited about the montage at the beginning there. You showed Amon-Ra St. Brown scoring a touchdown. That never gets old.
Awesome, man. Well, we love that. All right, so let's get into the Detroit Lions, and let's talk some draft. All right, so I mentioned it in the beginning here. I said, hey, could they potentially take a quarterback? Thanks to the Rams and the trade of Matthew Stafford, Detroit has an additional first-round pick in the draft. Could they set themselves up in the future by taking a quarterback at 6? Is that possible?
It's possible. It's plausible. I don't think it's going to happen, but a compelling argument can be made that they probably should. Look, Jared Goff will be the starter in 2023. The 2022 version of Jared Goff deserves that. Played very well. Earned his Pro Bowl spot. Was one arguably certainly a top 10 quarterback, or probably a top 5 quarterback at the end of the season. Played really, really well. He is the only quarterback under contract, literally the only one on the roster. They're not bringing back Nate Sudfeld. Their practice squad guy, Steven Montez, I think it's Seattle in the XFL, I want to say. I'm like, doesn't matter. He's not an NFL guy. They got to get somebody in behind him. They got to get probably 2 guys. And the prevailing school of thought, and this is more just guesswork than knowing anything, so they're going to draft one and they're going to sign one. Sign the backup that will come in if Jared Goff, gets hurt and has to sit out for a quarter or, God forbid, 4 games. And a rookie that they can groom, develop into something that could eventually take over for Jared Goff, whose contract, after what happened with Daniel Jones and Derek Carr in the last couple days, is going to get a lot higher after this season. Right now, he makes $30 million a year. That's great. If you're paying him $45, $48 million a year with over 60% of that guaranteed, that's a little bit more of a problem. So they could fix that by taking a guy at 6. I can't rule it out. I can't rule it out, and I am probably stronger inclined to do it than what they are. It's probably the safe answer there.
Well, and Jared Goff was surprisingly effective last year.
He was. He absolutely
if you look at his numbers, it was a surprise to me, and maybe not to you because, you're around him and know and what he's capable of. And with what we've seen from before, former first overall pick. So, hey, roll with Goff. And, the offense is starting to build. It really is. And Detroit is, you're looking at that NFC North, and they're right there, man. They're there. If quarterback isn't the pick at 6, like you said, well, maybe 2nd, 3rd, 4th round, whatever, that might be an option. What other players might they be targeting at 6 and also a little bit later down in the draft? I think it's 6 and 18, right? That's
6 and 18, yes.
Yeah.
They have to get a cornerback. They are in desperate need of a cornerback. They actually need 2 because their slot guy, Will Harris, who's a hybrid safety cornerback playing in the slot, is a free agent. And we're hoping he finds another job somewhere else. We're hoping that he doesn't come back. Right now, their outside corners are Jerry Jacobs, who's pretty good but playing a little bit too high on the depth chart, and Jeff Okudah, who, other than like a 6-game stretch at the beginning of last season, has been a real disappointment. They got to get a guy that can cover on the outside, press man coverage, turn and run, handle big bodies, not get lost if he has to go across the middle of the field. They need that guy. So Christian Gonzalez, Devon Witherspoon, they both make a lot of sense. Joey Porter Jr. makes a lot of sense. Deonte Banks from Maryland makes a ton of sense. Probably more at 18 than 6.
Uh-huh.
They're certainly looking at, most people in Lions land, and myself included, would be surprised if they don't use one of the first-round picks on a cornerback. The question is, you have to take one at 6, or can you wait to 18 and get a guy like Banks, or even a guy like Brian Branch, who would play that slot safety nickel role in Detroit, and probably do it very well, certainly better than what we've had in a while. That's the question: is who would you take at 6? If it's not a quarterback and it's not a cornerback, Jalen Carter. Who knows what's going on with that dude? Like, I would love to say that yes, that would be great, but nobody really knows. So he certainly makes sense from a need standpoint. They have to get a nose tackle. Aleem McNeil kicked from the 1 to the 3 technique last year, did really, really well, and he sort of clicked with Aiden Hutchinson. They don't really need a defensive end. Doesn't mean they won't take one, but Aiden Hutchinson, Josh Pascal, James Houston last year. They're bringing Charles Harris and or Romeo Okwara back. Like they're pretty well set there. They could get somebody more long term, but I don't think you're doing that at 6. Tyree Wilson, who I don't actually think will be there at 6, makes some sense as a guy that could get better, over time. I don't think Will Anderson's going to be there, and it's way too early for Miles Murphy for my taste. So I kind
of that sweet spot for it, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of it's a weird area. They're not really in the market for a wide receiver, and that's absurdly early for a wide receiver, at least in this class, although I do like JSN a lot. Offensive line, I mean, they're bringing all 5 starters back other than their right guard, and the guy who was the starter 2 years ago, Halapula Vadi Vaitai. I said it right.
Ooh, try that again. Say that again.
I know, right? No, he's Big V. He should be healthy this year and back, so they don't really need a starting offensive lineman. So where do you go? I mean,
I imagine Detroit has probably spoken to these corners at the combine. Do you have any news or rumors on what they? Oh yeah, where they're leaning? Or are they? I'm thinking Gonzalez maybe, or Witherspoon, as you mentioned. Like, what have you heard?
So they have met with both of them. They know Gonzalez well because his sister is married to David Blau, who was the Lions' backup quarterback for several years. That's his, and she's an Olympic sprinter or hurdler from Colombia. So the athleticism runs in their family. Their dad was also an Olympian, he comes by his athleticism very naturally. The problem is that he doesn't play with a lot of dog in him. And when Aaron Glenn is your defensive coordinator and you want to be aggressive and in your face, you kind of want some dog. That's Witherspoon. That's also Banks. I got to throw him in as a guy like I'm really warming to the idea of him at 18 after standing in front of him at the combine at the podium. They've talked to all those guys. They've met privately with all those guys. I think they're sorting their way through it. And again, some of it is what other position would you take at 6? Do you reach for something? Do you get the quarterback there, or do you trade out? And I think it's funny. We amongst the Lions writers that were down there, somebody point blank asked, like, who would you take at 6 with X off the board? And we're all like, I don't know. So they're a great candidate to trade down, especially if that 4th quarterback and only the 4th quarterback is left on the board.
Yeah.
They're in a great spot to trade out if a team wants to come up from 12 or 16 or even like 30 if they want to make it work. So I can't rule that out either. And I'm honestly kind of rooting for that as I go through these mock draft scenarios. I'm like, I don't know about Jalen Carter. I don't know about a lot of these things.
All right. If you like sports and playing sporting games, download the Champions Round app. Get playing and start winning. And use the promo code DraftBros for a free $10 and check out our newest game mode, Spicy Slips. If you love live sports gaming, the NBA, or you just want some extra action this NFL offseason, come play Spicy Slips, build a 2 to 5 leg parlay of live props, and win big today. You mentioned Amon-Ra St. Brown, and your eyes just lit up. I'm curious if you feel that way about Jameson Williams, and Dan has a question in regards to that.
Yeah. So we know you took Jameson Williams last year, and he was injured, and he came on at the end of the year. So with his development, obviously you have Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's been a great pick as he's been in the league. So where do you feel comfortable, if at all, taking a receiver in this draft?
It's a good question, Dan. I wouldn't do one early, but I think third round, fourth. They currently don't have a fourth round pick. That doesn't mean they're not going to make a fourth round pick, but that's sort of the range where I would be looking for it. A guy like Jonathan Mingo out of Ole Miss makes sense to me, or a pure slot guy, Tank Dell, even though he's tiny. Guys like that, guys that can get open quickly. Mingo's a very different type of receiver. He's a much bigger receiver. And they need one or the other. They either need like the instant open, quicker than fast slot receiver, or they need a big, wide-bodied guy on the outside to take the place of Quintez Cephas, who just can't stay healthy. He might have gotten hurt while I said that sentence. So they got to get somebody there. Josh Reynolds is the number 3. They like him. Caleb Raymond played great last year for being a 5'8", 175-pound outside receiver. He's got some dog in him, man. He, pound for pound, is one of the best blocking wide receivers in the league. They like him. He's also their kick returner, so he's safe in that regard. But they need somebody, again, to fit one of those two other roles, and that's a third or a fourth round pick for me.
Can I build on his question about Jameson Williams?
Sure.
Do you see him as I don't want to say generational type of player, but do you see him as a guy who's going to come in and absolutely make a huge impact in his second year, if you want to call it his second year? I mean, he had some really good, impressive touches last year. When he got the ball, he was mashing it. So what's your take on Williams?
Yeah, I think he'll be a lot better after having a training camp under his belt, after getting his feet wet against the speed and the power of the NFL compared to what it is in the SEC even. He was a little bit overwhelmed by some of that. And the fact that he didn't train, that his entire offseason was spent rehabbing so he could get back on the field. Well, then he got back on the field, and it's like, wow, I probably should have practiced a little bit more, or not saying that he didn't, but like it just wasn't there. This time he knows the offense now. He doesn't have to learn the offense. He knows Jared Goff. He understands the dynamics of playing with the other receivers and things like that. So the stability in the offense, I think, is going to do wonders for him. We're very excited about his potential. He's got that just ludicrous speed, man. It's fun to watch him run just all out. He needs to get the ball more. He's got to catch the ball more. He caught 1 of 9 targets. He did have another one that was taken away by a penalty. They did work him in on a couple of jet sweeps, so the touches are there. And when he gets it in his hands, man, he is fun to watch, and he can run away from anybody. It's just a matter of him getting more acclimated to being an NFL player than a college player. And
do you see him as someone who, I mean, obviously he has the talent and the athletic ability, and so often we see that with college players that come into the league, and there's the path that they go either up or down. Do you see him as a guy who is a little bit more cerebral when it comes to understanding like the plays and being able to understand what's going on? And so many times we see that first year, it's like, deer in headlights, but and talent kind of takes over. But as they get more acclimated with it, do you kind of see him as that type of a player?
I hope so. Yeah. And I do think that he will be much more in tune with the offense and where he needs to be. The big thing is in Ben Johnson's offense, you've got to be when and where you have to be, like right there. There's no room for error on that because everything is synced up and finely tuned. And when you're not in that, and he wasn't in that enough, it does create some problems. So he's got to learn that. He's not a dumb guy. He's a guy who's going to get it. He's going to work at it, and hopefully we see a very impactful Jameson Williams, because what he offers to that offense, he makes Amon-Ra St. Brown that much better. Because if Amon-Ra's in the slot and you got a 4-1-9 guy running outside him, good luck if you're a safety. Pick your poison. Jared Goff can hit that deep throw. Didn't have a lot of success with it last year throwing a DJ Shark, but different animal out there now.
The Lions have 5 picks in the top 82.
Yep.
What players do you kind of see them targeting in those 5 picks?
Yeah, we have 6, 18, 49, 56, which was the Vikings pick. We got that for TJ Hawkinson. And then the third rounder is somewhere in the 80s. I don't know. I can't remember.
81,
right?
81.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So any guys that you're specifically thinking, oh, you know what, this would be a good fit. It hits our need, and he's a good player. Maybe someone that you saw at the combine who just is like, whoa, I like this guy.
Yeah, there's a couple of guys. Keanu Benton, the defensive tackle from Wisconsin, stood out as a guy who. So the big Dan Campbell, the head coach, wears a hat that says "grit" on it a lot. Keanu Benton said "grit" in his combine interview like 8 times.
Whoa.
Like if they're and he's absolutely perfect for what they need as a nose tackle who can get up the field, but also peel off and get outside a little bit. So he makes a lot of sense. Actually, another guy who was at the exact same podium a day later, Jamie Robinson, the safety from Florida State, hard hitting, undersized, has the dog in him. I hate going back to that, but it is really something that they do look for, especially on defense. And he's a guy that can play. He has played that slot role before. He can attack in that slot, the edge slot role. He's very good at that. So he makes a lot of sense. Those are probably second rounders. They do need a running back at some point. I love Jahmyr Gibbs, but I love a lot of these running backs. Man, it's a great year to need a running back. I like Eric Gray. Yeah. I like the dude from Pitt, whose name I won't even try to pronounce. I like the dude from Syracuse. I like Tyjae Spears from, my goodness, the Senior Bowl. The Tyjae from Tulane, man, he tore it up down there. Watching him, it was electrifying. It was so much fun to see him run inside with shifty speed. That's not easy to do, and he did it very well. Another guy, third rounder, I actually put in a mock draft that I did this morning for Lions Wire. Zach Charbonnet from UCLA, formerly from Michigan. Very good fit in the Jamal Williams role. If Jamal Williams doesn't come back, he is a free agent, and we don't know whether he'll be back or not. But he makes a lot of sense there too. So those guys make sense. Offensive line, it's probably early to take one of those guys, but man, Darnell Wright, that guy. Oh man, like Pantera, vulgar display of power, baby. Like that's what he's all about. I like.
Is he one of those guys that you want him to come off the bus first, so the opposing team says, "This is who we have to play"?
Definitely, and you just put some loops of him, pancaking dudes. Like he absolutely stymied, shut out, blanked Will Anderson last year. And Will Anderson actually acknowledged that in his combine interview. They asked him who the toughest guy was. And no question, Darnell Wright, man. Like, he's got some. He's not perfect, but this is a guy, 5-star recruit, struggled a little bit early, bounced around, found his home his last year. Was one of the best linemen I've seen at the Senior Bowl. I've been, I think, 14 of them. One of the best ones I've ever seen there. So he's certainly interesting if you're looking for. So real quick. The Lions need a 6th offensive lineman, an extra tackle. They run an extra tackle on 11% of their offensive plays, more than any other team. It is a role that they do have to fill. So they could take a tackle that won't play right away, or a guy that can play guard but also like kick out as your extra tackle. They do need that. You're probably not taking that in the early rounds, but he makes sense. Even going later on, a guy like Jarrett Patterson out of Notre Dame, who projects as a center but can also play guard and also play right tackle on a bench and can move. That's a guy that I'm looking at a little bit later in the draft too.
All right, last question. I'm kind of going to go off script here. I know, right? This is a fairly decent tight end class, and you haven't mentioned tight end at all. And TJ Hawkinson is no longer on the team. Is there a possibility that Detroit might target a tight end, or are we looking at maybe a free agency signing to fill that role?
Yeah, so the rationale behind the T.J. Hawkinson trade was twofold. First, they weren't going to pay him. Secondly, their offense works fine with the tight ends not being a premium position. They actually set a team record for touchdown receptions by tight ends with the likes of Brock Wright and James Mitchell and Shane Zylstra. They like James Mitchell a lot. He's a 5th-round pick from last year. He probably would have been a 3rd-round pick if he didn't tear his knee up in his last game at Virginia Tech. He came on pretty well at the end of the season, so they like what they've got there. They do like Brock Wright. He's the best Brock Wright that Brock Wright can be, and they appreciate that. They do need somebody else, though. Zylstra is a free agent. Like, he's just a guy. I hate to say that about him because he's a nice guy, but you can do better there. I don't see them taking an early tight end at all, not probably before the 3rd round. A later round guy, a guy like Payne Durham out of Purdue makes some sense. I'm trying to think of some of these other guys that I saw. Not the first two tiers of tight ends, but go down to that next level, fourth, fifth, sixth round, and they can certainly be attacking it there. Free agency, I don't suspect that they pay for one other than maybe a low tier. Thank God we're out of the just overpaying Jesse James business, because that one still hurts.
Well, that's an interesting nugget that you shared, especially when the coach is a former tight end. We're not necessarily going to look at that tight end as a tell you what, receiving offense.
Dan, and when I say that they like James Mitchell a lot, specifically Dan Campbell really likes James Mitchell. He sees a lot of himself in him. So they have big things planned, probably a lot bigger than what outsiders or fantasy football people would ever consider. He's a guy. Fantasy football advice free from right here. If he's on the board on your last pick, take him. He's just going to get a lot more targets this year.
That's good info. Dan, any other questions that you have for Jeff? Anything?
One real quick. This is also off script. So, when you guys drafted DAndre Swift, there was a lot of expectation that came with it, and I think it's fair to say he hasn't really lived up to that.
That's correct.
Why do you think that is? Like, what happened with him?
He's got injury issues, and he needs to learn to differentiate between being injured and being hurt. And that was a point of contention between him and Deuce Staley, who is no longer with the team. He left for Carolina. We have a new running backs coach and assistant head coach, Deuce Staley, again gone. They replaced him with Scotty Montgomery, who came from Indianapolis, where he had the same role, worked with Jonathan Taylor, worked with Marlon Mack before that even. The hope is that there will be a better click there, because Staley and Swift were just not simpatico, man. It just didn't work. Mm-hmm. The other thing with DAndre, he too often doesn't trust his eyes, and he thinks he's faster than he is. And it's weird because he is fast, but he thinks that he can get through holes when he sees them and hesitates. And he's just when he gets the ball and goes with authority, he's really good. Like you get it. Like I see why he was the second running back taken in that draft, and has a lot of fans. Like I get it, but he just doesn't consistently play to that level. And he's a guy that nagging injuries nag him more than they probably should, and more than they do most other guys.
That's good information right there, especially those in fantasy leagues who are looking to see what they might have out of DAndre Swift.
I'll tell you what, they would love for DAndre Swift to be the number 2 back and have a number 1 above him. And in that role, I think he'd be great, because he's exceptional out of the backfield catching the pass, and can pass protect too. So if you can get somebody to either be Jamal Williams the way he was this year, or somebody to replicate that, that'd be fantastic. That'd be nice. Give me that. Find that for me.
All right.
Love Jamal Williams.
Yep. He is Jeff Risdon, and that's at Jeff Risdon on Twitter. And you can find him at the Detroit Lions podcast, as well as the Lions Wire. And Jeff, it was a pleasure having you on the show. Really, you hit this out of the park. We really appreciate the information that you shared about the Lions. And we're looking forward to finding out exactly what happens.
Aren't we all? Thanks, guys. I appreciate you having me in.
Thanks, Jeff.
All right.